Movie friends, my name is Seth. It's always been our intention with Movie Friends to not just cover the biggest movies coming out in theaters, or Oscar winners, or the most popular movies from each year. We like to bounce around and cover movies from different time periods, different genres, and different countries. Sometimes we will focus on something, like our weird series that we did on Jim Carrey. But for the most part, if you look at our catalog of episodes, including the ones on our Patreon, it's pretty varied, and honestly, it's one of the things that I'm most proud of with our show. Like, what other podcast is doing Miami Connection, and Pariah, and Madam Web? Honestly, probably a lot of them are, but don't tell me about them. Let me live in ignorant pride. I really like to use film as a way of learning about other people and myself. I've said it before, and I'm certainly not the first to say it, but I love people, and I love learning about what makes them tick. What they're interested in, what they're not interested in, what makes them cry, what makes them laugh, and what's important to them. Movies are a great playground to play in when trying to figure out all of these things for yourself. Because of this, my connection with movies is very strong. I take them very seriously, and I feel very deeply about them. I also love philosophy, especially this idea from Socrates. The more that you know, the more you should know that you really don't know that much at all. I think that when you've seen a lot of movies and you're pursuing a knowledge of film history or film production, you can kind of go one of two ways. The first way you can go is you become a know-it-all. You become very proud, and you become very arrogant, and when someone hasn't seen a movie that you consider to be a classic, you look down on them because they don't have the same knowledge that you have. They're not part of the club. The other way, which I think is the better way you can go, is the more movies that you see, and the more you learn, and the more that you discover, you realize that you haven't seen every movie ever made, and you never will see every movie ever made. And that a lot of what you have seen is based on the time and the place that you were born in. Sure, you might be like an expert in the movies of 1999, but can you name a movie from Portugal? You're a prisoner of your own tastes and of your own interests. And now, I'm making that sound like a bad thing, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with living your life, watching fun movies, watching good movies, and then dying one day. For me, I don't want to settle in my movie experience. I don't want to become comfortable. I don't want to let myself judge things based on my own lack of knowledge or my lack of experience. I want to be more like Socrates and always be aware that the only thing I really know is that I don't know everything. I know very little, really. This is the idea and the spirit behind this new series I'm doing over on our Patreon. It's called One Director at a Time, and I'm going to focus on the movies of one director for about a year each. I decided to start out with a director that I've had a really up and down relationship with, Quentin Tarantino. As a teenager, I loved Tarantino. But as my knowledge of movies grew and I experienced a wider range of writers and directors, I loved him less in comparison. Is this fair? Was I just in a different place then? A place that was more conducive to loving his films? Have I changed for better or for worse? Our relationship to films change over time, and I'm glad that they do. You can't step in the same river twice, and it's rare to watch the same movie over and over and have the same exact experience. How many times do we revisit something and notice a detail we've never seen? Or we gain a perspective on life that makes a familiar line sound so different on the 20th time around? Tarantino, to me, is a very interesting character in film history. He's similar to Hitchcock in that people who don't know the names of directors know his name. He inserts himself into his movies. His movies start out with the fifth film from Quentin Tarantino. He casts himself in his own movies, for better or for worse. Outside of his films, he's made himself into a public persona, someone who utilizes talk shows and podcasts to put not only his movies out there, but himself. Tarantino is the first director to host Saturday Night Live. No, I'm not counting any actors who also directed, although with Tarantino that line kind of gets blurred. But as far as I can tell, he is still the only director to ever host Saturday Night Live. And say what you want about that show, but that's a big deal. Tarantino goes from behind the chair to in front of the camera with ease, and the media eats it up. Tarantino is probably one of the first directors that I watched every movie from his filmography, which is easy to do because there's not a lot of them, and because the majority of his films are major moments in movie history. Fun fact, the morning after my wife and I got married, we woke up, got breakfast, and then went to see Inglourious Basterds in the theater. On our honeymoon. I say all that to say we were big fans. But then, as time went on, some things started to shift. 1, I got older. 2, I watched more movies. And I found all the things that Tarantino was borrowing from or paying homage to, and it didn't excite me. It made me feel less excitement over his work. Suddenly, the movies didn't feel fresh and inventive. They felt like he was using material that most people weren't aware of, and he was getting away with something. I've stayed in that mindset for the last few years. I loved The Hateful Eight, and I was fortunate enough to see the roadshow that they did with programs and an intermission. But by the time we got around to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the magic was gone for me. I didn't see what everyone else was seeing anymore. My view had become a little cynical, as if I was standing there with my arms crossed, asking the screen to show me what it could do. In my defiance, I wanted an old dog to show me some new tricks. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to be so full of myself and my opinions that I'm blinded to what everyone else sees as greatness, what I once thought of as great. Art is subjective, and I'm okay with not liking certain movies anymore. What I don't want to do, though, is not be willing to give something another chance. So that's my plan. I'm going to revisit each film and give it the full Movie Friends treatment. I'm going to give each one another shot and try to find out how I feel about Mr. Tarantino's films all over again. I'm going to be joined by some friends along the way, which is the more exciting part of this series for me. I want to hear from other people and see things the way that they do. I've been wrong before. I mean, I've also been right before too, but yeah. So that's the plan. And if you enjoy listening to Movie Friends, I hope that you'll consider signing up over at patreon.com/moviefriendspodcast and go on the journey with us. Episodes will be out monthly, and in the meantime, you can catch up on all of our other Patreon shows, like Ghibli Gabs, where we talk about the movies of Studio Ghibli, or Weirdcast, our Freaks and Geeks recap show, where we go episode by episode through the entire series. There's a lot of stuff over there. It's kind of nuts, actually, how much there is. Anyway, thank you very much for listening. Have a good one.
Movie Friends is produced by Seth Vargas and Michelle Rubenstein. Music by Anthony Pecora. If you like the show, please subscribe and give us a rating. It really helps us find new friends. Thanks!